Hey everybody, welcome to Mom to Mom. I am Kathy Baker. I'm the Director of Education at Christ United Methodist Church in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And I get to lead a group each Thursday morning at 10 o'clock. It's called Mom to Mom, and we have moms that have children from infants all the way through teenagers. And we would love to have you join us each Thursday at 10 on Facebook Live. And I have other places that this will be posted also for you to catch up on the lessons. So go ahead and comment if this is something you are interested in being a part of, and I'll see that you can be a part of this wonderful group of moms. Each week I give parenting tips and find ways to encourage moms who are going through rearing children and just need a little bit of encouragement along the way. We typically meet face-to-face on Thursday mornings, but since we are sheltering in place, I've been offering these lessons and would love to help any mom on this journey. This is great for dads too, and so we invite you to join us too if you would just like to have some strategies to help you along the way. I've been very influenced by the writings and the works of Dr. Scott Turansky, who I think is just a wonderful parenting coach, and so I use a lot of tips and strategies I get from their work. Plus, I am a mom, I am a grandmother, and I have over 25 years experience as a teacher, a high school English teacher. And so I'm a certified life coach, and so those are the strategies and the experience, the background that I bring to this. So I'd love for you to be a part of this group. Today we're going to focus on getting kids to do what you tell them or ask them to do. We're going to make some distinctions between making a request and giving an instruction. See, I think what happens often is we give out an order or sometimes a request for kids to do something, and then we are just shocked and dismayed when they don't do that. And so I want us to figure out why that is happening. Part of the problem may be that the kids are not listening to you. Kids have a way of knowing when you really mean something and when things are really clear and when they're not. And so it's really important to be very clear in your instructions. In the lesson I did last week, I asked the mamas to write down a scenario where you asked a child or your children to do something, and either they did it or they didn't do it. And I want you to go back and think about that scenario and think about the beginning of it. What was the situation, the circumstance? Where were the children? Where were you? Did you get any kind of feedback or response after you asked them to do something? And then what happened from then on? So it will be really important, as I'm even teaching this lesson today, that you come up with some scenario that has happened in the past so that you can see if you followed these guidelines that I'm going to be sharing with you today. So after you think about the whatever you told them to do, determine if it was a request or if it was an instruction. When you give a request of someone, you give an option for them to either say yes or no. When you give an instruction, it is clearly filled with, this is what I'm telling you to do, and I need for you to do it, and then you fill in the blank. Now, in 5 minutes, in 10 minutes, whatever is relevant for that situation. So determine that first of all, how to actually give the specific instructions to your child. We learned last week there are 3 things that are really important to remember when you're giving this instruction. First of all, you need to get the child's attention. So the way to do that, there are 3 things that you need to do. You need to move in closer, you need to make eye contact, and then you need to ensure that they have stopped doing what they're doing. So those are the things. And I always encourage you, when you do our sessions, is to have a notebook and to keep your notes of the things that are important to remember. So again, number one, in giving that instruction, you need to get the child's attention by doing those three things: move closer, make eye contact, and ensure that they have stopped doing whatever they were doing. The next thing is you give a clear instruction, clear and firm. That is in a tone that is appropriate, it's calm, and it's matter of fact. You're not the command post. You're not command central shouting out orders from one end of the house and giving the command to a child in the other end of the house. So that's number two, give that clear instruction. And number three, teach your children how to respond. What is it you want them to say to you so that you know that message has been received? I live in the South. I raised my kids to say, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, yes, sir, no, sir. And so that's what I did to my children. I want them to say, yes, ma'am, if they have heard what I've told them to do. So those are the three things that we need to remember. Now I'm going to expand on those and give some very detailed things to get yourself into a pattern of giving clear instructions. And so the first thing to remember is, when you're ready to give instruction, you have to get close to the child. You can't shout it out from a different part of the room. You know, I always include this in my teaching strategies. It's important to not consider yourself as a command post. That it's going to take time to do these things. And so you will need to invest some time in building the relationship and teaching your children expectations for behavior. And so part of that means that you have to take time away from what you were doing in order to give the instruction. And so one way to do that is to get close to the child. Sometimes that might mean you call the child to come to you. And at other times, you may need to go to the child. Now, this is true for any age. We're talking about from the time they are able to walk and communicate until you launch them into adulthood. This is relevant. So either you go to the child or the child comes to you. Now, this is going to take practice of teaching the child what you mean by this. And so this is a coaching session that you have with your children. Again, we can't just expect them just to know what to do. We have to teach them. We train them up in the way that they should go. And when they're old, they won't depart from that. Jesus trained his disciples. He didn't just meet them fishing one day and said, okay, here, I'd like for you to go out and tell the world about me, and then have them go out and do that. He spent 3 years teaching them how to be a disciple and how to fish for other disciples. And so that's what we do with our children. We're going to teach them what it means to obey you. And so this is going to take a lot of practice. And so there's going to be a lot of dialogue about how you're going to be making eye contact. You're going to get closer to them, and you expect them to look at you and give you full attention. And when I call for you, then you need to come. And so you're building this relationship with them while you are giving instructions. So that is the important thing. You can call this whatever you want, but I would give it some kind of name. It could be as simple as, hey, we're going to practice come when you're called, coming to me when you're called. When I call you, you have to come. I like to use catchy things that are easily remembered, and that it's kind of the cue word. And so that I would use the words that you're going to be saying when the time comes. So come when I call, come when I call. And so you're going to be teaching. Again, this goes for any age. So it means that you will use their name. You're going to say, John, I need for you to come to me now. Or if you're going to him, that's going to make it a little bit easier. And so this takes practice. And so practice doing this. Make it fun if you need to. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, having fun with instruction. And so make it fun to practice calling them. I would use different methods to do it, calling their names and responding in different ways. Don't just do this when they're in trouble. This is separate from the time when you actually need for it to happen. And so choose your time quickly. Make it funny. You know, it's so interesting to me that it seems natural that we train dogs to do the things we want them to do. How many times do you practice with your dog of coming to you, and you hold out a little snack to give them, don't you, when the dog comes to you? And then what do? You pat the dog, you love on the dog. Now, I'm not saying your children are like dogs, but I'm saying to use the same kind of process when you're training your children to do the things you want them to do. And so you practice doing it, and then you give maybe a test run. And you tell them, hey, sometime during the day, we're going to practice this, so you need to be listening for this. And so that practice gives a routine to it. You know, our minds, our brains are so interesting to me. I love to study brain theory and brain research. And it takes practice to make habits in place. I often, when I'm teaching, talk about something for one specific thing for sometimes a few minutes. Sometimes I just repeat something for like 20 seconds because it takes a while for our brain to understand what's important to us and what we need to actually store in the hippocampus part of our brain. And so it's true for us and it's true for our kids. That's why routine will build the habit, and that's what you want to do repeatedly, build that routine. So let's say you want to give them an instruction and you move closer, but you see your child is engaged in something. It's so important to remember that your timing and their timing may be off. And so it's important to remember if there is any kind of wiggle room with this instruction that you're giving them, to consider the timing of the instruction. So this is number 2 in our steps. Consider the timing. We want to ask ourselves the question, is this the time to make this request, this instruction, to address this problem? Or is this something I need to do later? And so we need to pause for just a moment before we give this instruction or make this request, hand out something, detailed information, or whatever it is. We need to figure out when is the best time to handle this situation. Now, and this is so important here to pause and just consider what you're asking them to do. If you're getting ready to walk out the door to go somewhere, if you get to do that when you're listening to this, I'm not sure when you're going to be freed up to do things like that, but if it's something that you need to do soon, then you don't have wiggle room. But if there is an issue or a problem that you need to go over with your child and give some clear instructions and detailed information about, you consider that timing. Is this the good time, or is later the better time? So it is going to make a huge difference on the response that you get if you pick the correct time and the correct tone. So let's say that we have an issue that we're going to have to address and give clear instructions about some kind of problem that the child's dealing with, whether it's doing homework, making the bed, helping with the dishes, helping to do the laundry, putting the clothes on, whatever it is, whatever the problem is. The process is how you will formulate that information, and that's important to get the process figured out. If you are experiencing a lot of resistance, then you might be overemphasizing tasks, things you want them to do. And so then when you begin to look at what the real problem is, they probably see you as command central. command and control, and that you're just shouting out orders and do this and do that. And so they are responding to you in a way that is offensive, it's inappropriate. They may be shouting, they may be being too passive because they see you as command central instead of somebody who is relational. So you want to figure out your timing, and you want to figure out your approach to them. Are you being too task focused, or are you trying to build an appropriate relationship and really coach your children into behaving properly? So if you ask your child to help in the kitchen, and before you finish the instruction, wait for it, because I know this is what happens. He is whining and he is complaining. Then that's where you stop the process. That's where you stop the process, and you realize that you have a whining situation that you're going to need to deal with, because that you have either not addressed the problem appropriately at the right time, or you have a whiner. And that's going to be the issue that you're going to need to address before you can start giving good instructions. So you're working in the kitchen, you ask for help, you get whining. So you get the whining, and so this is assuming the child is old enough in elementary school, old enough to help with those chores in the kitchen. So you get the whining. If the job that you're doing is something that needs to continue, you are preparing dinner, you don't have time at that moment to go and deal with the whining, you continue to do the kitchen work, and you save the conversation for after dinner. Okay, this timing thing is really important, because here's what I know often happens. You're in the kitchen, you need help, you're requesting that someone come and do it, you get the whine, you get the pushback, you get the complaints, and so you might make a comment such as, I've tried to use words to help get you focused on what I need in here, and that didn't work. So we're going to have a conversation about the next step after dinner. Okay, that might be noteworthy, because often what happens is you're in the kitchen and then they don't do what you ask them to do, and then the episode ensues. They gave you some kind of answer, you give them some answer, and then that dialogue starts going back and forth, angry retorts, comments going back and forth, and then nothing really is accomplished except hurt feelings and tears and anger. And so that's what we want to try to prevent. So you do want to address the whining and the complaining. And you do want to tell them, that's not appropriate. That's not the appropriate response. I've heard what you have said. I'm going to continue to do the work in here. I tried to use my words to ask you to help me. You did not listen. And so we will have a conversation about this after dinner. And then they have to experience the waiting period. Okay, so that is kind of that whole second step here, where you are trying to consider the timing, and then you're going to talk more about that issue. So that whole thing is considering building the relationship. Those first two steps, where you are getting close to the child, you're making the eye contact, you are making sure that you're giving the appropriate kind of information to them, and so you've gotten closer to them, and then you're considering the timing. Am I off on this, or is this timing right? And the child is just not responding here at all, and we're going to have to go to the next step of consequences, or having the conversation and revisiting the appropriate response. I will add here that the child has two responsibilities in life. It's the job description that we get from the Bible. It is, children are to obey their parents, and they're to honor them. And so all of this is connected to that, their obedience and their honoring you. So those are the first two steps. The third step is to actually give the instruction. So you make a statement about whatever it is that you want to happen. What is the objective here that you want to do before you give the instruction? And so you might say, Ben, we are leaving for swim lessons in 15 minutes, and it's time to put your swim trunks on. And then you could follow it up with this. Can you help by choosing which ones you want to wear and get them out and then put them on? If not, I can pick them for you. Now, remember, you've already done the first two. You have already gotten the child's attention. You've gotten closer. You have made good eye contact. You've asked them to stop doing whatever they were doing. You've picked the right time. And then you make that statement that says, Ben, we're getting ready to leave for swim practice in 15 minutes. I need for you to pick out the trunks you want to wear and put them on. If you can't do that, I will pick them out for you. So in that, there's a lot of information and choice. You have given a time frame. They already have your attention. And then you need to make sure you say a word for time frame. They need to hear the words, you need to do this right now because we're leaving in 15 minutes. This indicates that this is a non-negotiable. This is what you do now. And then what you're expecting is a response. They have to respond. Again, you're teaching your children to do this. You're teaching them to respond to you by saying, okay, Mom, yes, ma'am, I hear you. Whatever you want to teach them to do it, to say. I know my son says to his 4-year-old when he asks him to do things, he tells them what to do. He's making eye contact. He's down on his level. He tells them what to do, and then he asks the question that says, yes, sir, and Eli has to repeat, yes, sir. And they've made the eye contact. So that's how he's training him to respond. So train your children to say whatever it is you need to hear from them. And so their answer does this. It tells you 3 things. First of all, it tells you that Ben heard you. Ben heard what you said. Number 2, it says the child is intending to do what you said. And number 3, then what you get to hear is the attitude. And so when the child says, yes, sir, the child needs to say it in the appropriate attitude that you need to hear, because that's the honor portion. All this is how the child is honoring you. And so once again, after you give the instruction, you are waiting for the child to acknowledge, okay, yes, I will do that. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Whatever it is you need to hear. And that's going to show he's heard you. He is intending to do it. And number 3, he has the right attitude in doing it. Now, some children at this point get into that pattern of arguing and making excuses when you ask them to do things. Now, there are a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes they just don't want to hear. They don't want to hear, oh, Mom, I don't want to go to swim practice. Why do I have to do? And I can't believe you're asking me to do whatever. They don't want to stop what they're doing. They dislike whatever it is they're doing. They're tired of swim lessons. They're done with that. This is an intrusion on my time and whatever. So if the child begins to do this whole range of things, argue, complain, whine, grumble, you stop the process. You don't continue to talk about the task. Instead, talk about the way you're relating and the way that the child is responding. Because now we've moved away from the task and the obedience to the honoring. They're not honoring you. And this is where you might need to give a consequence. But don't get goaded into an argument. It takes 2 to do that. And so remember, again, this is going to take a lot of practice and a lot of coaching. Don't expect this to work perfectly the first time. It's the pattern that you put into place. And so let's say you get a lot of pushback and argument and whining, and you stop it there. And you say, our policy here in our family and the way we do things in our family is that I use words first and I give you the clear directions and instruction. You tell me that you understand it, and then I expect you to follow through. If you have an attitude about it, or if you don't do what I have asked you to do, then we move to the next step, and that's going to be consequences. Now, the child should know that, and go back and look at our previous lessons, and you will see that I've gone over how to go through the consequences and which consequences are appropriate at certain times, and when you resort to actually removing privileges. And so that's where you stop that process and you then go into the consequences. If there's constant arguing and fussing and that is continuing, then you set a time to have a longer conversation about that. It may sound something like this: Ben, I really love you and you have so many good qualities, but I've noticed that whenever I give you an instruction, you want to discuss it or argue about it. And for a while, when I give you an instruction, we're not going to discuss it. I'm going to tell you now that I expect you to obey. I expect you to obey right away, even though it may not be convenient. I'm going to be careful with my timing, but you may be in the middle of something that I need to stop, and I need for you to do something else because I've tried to consider the timing, and I want you to stop it immediately and respond correctly to me. And we're going to do this. We're going to do this for a period of time, and we're going to practice until you understand what I'm talking about. So do you see how you disrupt that intention to argue, that intention to badger and complain and whine? You stop it there. Now, it doesn't mean that Ben doesn't have to get his swim trunks on and go out the door to swim. He's going to have to do that. But the fact that he's complained and he's whined and he's tried to argue is where you stop the process there and say, I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I hear that you're complaining. That doesn't change the fact that swim practice is happening soon and you need to get your trunks on. But we are going to continue this conversation. And then you do follow up and continue the conversation, because you know what often happens? We're in the middle of the arguing and the complaining and the whining and the carrying on, and we get back and we get engaged in that. They bait us right into that because they know they can do that and they think they'll get their way eventually. And then you get into the car and you have this ugly episode of driving and your blood pressure has increased and there are tears and there's flailing and there's wailing. And then you go to swim practice and then all is forgotten. And then the pattern repeats. So the things that I'm teaching are the ways to disrupt the pattern so that you get the result that you need in the long run. But it's going to take some consistent discipline and guidance and coaching. So this is a very intentional plan. And it gets to be pretty intense when you say, I've tried to use words, but you're not receiving those words, and you're wanting to argue and complain. I'm not going to do that. We will continue this conversation later. Now, again, some of that talk about doing this later is dependent on the age of the child. If you have toddlers, this becomes a different scenario, because you may have to have more direct contact and direct action with the child. You may realize they're not capable of knowing when 15 minutes is up and that I have to pick out swim trunks and I'm trying to watch Paw Patrol. That's just, you might have to adjust what you're expecting the child to do based on the child's age. So, make sure you get that. And if you have questions about that, please put that in the comments section. All right, so then now let's go back and look at what our steps are. First of all, we got close to the child. We made eye contact. We made sure they are paying attention to us, and that we then have considered the appropriate timing when we're asking them to do this. And then we go in for that instruction that is very clear. It's firm. It has a time limit on it. And then we get feedback. Yes, I understand that. Or no, I don't understand that. All right, the next section is a waiting period. Once you've given the instruction, you tell the child what you need to do. So Ben is supposed to go into his room. He's supposed to pick out the swim trunks, and he's supposed to then be ready to go in 15 minutes. And so here's what you do in that instruction. You've given the instruction, and you ask your child to go do it, and then you say, report back. Use whatever language you want to do. But I'll be waiting at the door for you. Go and do this. I'll be, you probably don't need to be in the car waiting, because then you might have to come back in and get Ben. So I'll be in the kitchen. I'll be in the den. I'll be in my bedroom. I'll be wherever. I'll be at the garage door or whatever. And that's where I want you to come to me. Do you see what you're doing? You've gotten his attention. He's told you that he understands this. You've given him a deadline, a time limit. He has affirmed this and been positive about it, and now you're in the waiting period to see if he's obedient, and that is the accountability portion that you've built in. You see, this is a whole package of instructions that you do. And some of you are thinking, oh, dear me, I don't have time to do all this. Let me tell you what. You don't have an option. If you want your children to be obedient and follow through the instructions, you have to teach them and coach them how to do this. And so you give the instruction and you ask your child to go and do it, and then you say, report back. This gives them accountability. And let me tell you what else it helps. It helps those distracted children. It helps those ADD children. I raised two. I know what it's like to have children. I taught children who have ADD, and they get so distracted. That accountability portion is so important, in breaking down the instruction into small pieces based on the ability of the child and the time span of the child. And so it helps the distracted child. And so you say, we need to leave. So get your shoes and bring them back to me. So if a child is 4 and can't put shoes on, and you've gone and done the appropriate steps, you have gone to the child and you have gotten attention, and you said, we are getting ready to go to grandma's house, and I need for you to go to your bedroom and get your blue tennis shoes or the light up shoes or the whatever shoes you want. Be really clear on that. If you go get those shoes, and I need for you to bring them back now. And so you say, I'm going to be waiting for you. I'll be in the doorway. I'll be in the kitchen. I'll be wherever. And so you've given that. And so you're waiting. As you wait, you're watching for the distraction. Now, as you're practicing this, your little child, your little James, may need a lot of close monitoring. But as he begins to realize that you're waiting and you're holding him accountable, and that mama didn't forget about what he's supposed to do, he's going to feel more pressure to complete the task. And then you've set the pattern up. You've set the habit in place. Now, children who need constant reminders lack a character trait. They lack this sense of responsibility. They lack the sense of obedience and honor. And so that's where you practice over and over. Make it a game. Practicing giving the request, the instruction, and then waiting it out until they come and do it. You can do this through the high school years. And they may feel like this is silly and it's corny, but they'll get the message. If they haven't learned it by those years, then you say, this is what you should have been doing when you were 5, but you didn't. So at 15, we're having to practice it. And the sooner you understand that this is the way it's going to be in our home, the quicker we can move on to other things that are much more fun. And so you can practice it with a 16-year-old. Again, make it fun and make it silly and make it corny, but let them know that it is the way you're going to do things. And so children who need those constant reminders, then you start looking for the gap in what's going on. They're being disrespectful to you if you have to keep reminding them. If they're completely distracted, then maybe, and they can't seem to get it done, then there may be some attention issues that you're going to have to really sort through. They may need closer supervision. They may need smaller tasks. You might have to chunk those tasks. You might have to check in with them more frequently. But hey, you're the parent. You have to be responsible for teaching and coaching and training. It takes more time to wait, but it is how you teach responsibility. Define what that is. You are responsible. Here, use that word. Again, sometimes we're afraid to use the words that may be biblical, or that may be the words that are used for the character traits at school, but those are the words we need to teach them. Usually school systems have character traits. They have one for each month. use those in working with your children on these things. I know responsibility is always one. It's one worldwide. I do mission work with schools in Nicaragua, and one of their monthly character traits is responsibility. And so I know this is a universal issue. It is a biblical precept that we are to be responsible. And so you're teaching your child responsibility, and you tell them responsibility is the ability to do something I ask you to do without my having to watch you. And so until you can do that, I have to watch you. Okay, that's another wonderful thing to write down. Sometimes it's good to have the script. Responsibility is completing a task, a chore, a job, without somebody having to watch you do it. Until you learn that, I'm going to watch you do it. All right, and so the next thing is you've told the child in this waiting period that you'll be here waiting for them to come and to do. And so they have to come back in this next step. It's number 5, and you see that they've done it, and then you let them go. It's like they check in and then you release them. You inspect and release. Yes, they have the right shoes. Oh, good. You give them a pat on the back. You encourage them through that. Here is a quote. Children know what you expect by what you inspect. Children know what you expect by what you inspect. You know, that's the classroom teacher knows that. The classroom teacher knows that children will know what's important to the teacher by what the teacher either grades or checks up on or asks about or comes to the child for a conversation. They'll know. And so this will be something that you are going to teach. Now, this all takes energy. It takes time. But spend this time while you're sheltering in place, teaching and coaching your children. You're having to do so much with them now with school, and you're spending so much time. Make use of this wonderful gift that we have of time with our children. How about flipping that whole concept of the pandemic and the sheltering in place upside down and using it? Wow, what a gift. I have this opportunity to teach and coach my children. And so this gives you an opportunity when they come back to praise your child and tell them, wow, that was so responsible. That was the way to do it, and celebrate in whatever. You know, I hear sometimes parents say, but oh, why do we celebrate and praise when they do something that we've told them to do? Don't you love it? My love language is one of them is words of affirmation. I love for people to tell me I've done a good job. I love hearing those words. Your kids will too. I don't care if it's a job I'm required to do. I'm paid to do it. It's important to hear you've done a good job, and tell them that you're thankful for that. Teach them that this is part of obedience and a part of honoring you. Okay, so that our time has come to an end for today. We've looked at the ways to get your kids to do what you tell them to do, and I've given you 5 things to consider in this process. And next week we're going to look at practicing this and using correction and using discipline after the fact. We'll just kind of pick up on this where we left off today and continue that. In the meantime, if you have questions about that, please send me, put it in the comment section, and I will respond to that, and I can use that as an example for next week's lesson. I hope that you will choose to join us next week. I can't wait to hear from you and to see how things are going in your life and in your family. And so you all stay safe, and give those kids a hug today. Bye.